It is through tests and difficulties that the rich flower of faith emerges. Today, Baha'u'llah's faith is shining forth once again in Uganda, the jewel of Africa.
The Baha'i community has a good working relationship with the government today. George Olinga shares some of the exciting advancements.
In Uganda, we still find so much in our work with the Baha'i faith, and a lot of reference being put back onto the hand of the cause, Mr. Olinga, dealing with the various government officials. The mention of the Baha'i faith, the officials will immediately go back and try to relate their relationship with the hand of the cause when he was alive. And this has greatly helped us a lot in our public relations activities in Uganda. Whatever ministry you went to, you will find somebody who knew him very closely as friends, or they just heard about him. So it has helped us a lot, and we find his spirit is really assisting the progress of the faith in this country.
The Baha'is participated in writing the new constitution, which created 9 member councils to guide each city. It also guarantees equal rights for women and universal education for children.
We have been observing the methods the government is using quite closely related to Baha'i principles, and this has been a source of encouragement to the believers themselves, feeling that what they've been doing all this time seems to be moving towards the right direction. In the area of equality between men and women, we've been able to observe the government putting into place a law which guarantees certain positions for women in decision-making bodies of the local councils, the district councils, and in parliament. And it's interesting to note that in Uganda we have a woman vice president among the various women that we have, and recently we have a woman minister responsible for ethics and integrity. And she recently invited the Baha'is to participate in a workshop to assist her and give her some guidance on how she could go ahead, bringing back moral values.
The Baha'i National Committee for the Advancement of Women is very active and strongly supports the annual Women's Day Parade.
The 2 schools, that is the Louis Gregory Memorial Schools in Odusai and Tiling, have been doing very well. The year before, the Tiling School did the best in the whole district, and it was a big surprise to the government official that a rural school was able to come out first compared to the schools in the town. And this really pleased us. And this in part was due to the fact that there was quite a lot of input by the Baha'is. There was special in-house training for the teachers during the holidays so that they see teaching as a service to humanity. The progress of the faith in Uganda, one can look from the time of the renovation of the Baha'i House of Worship. Since then, new carpets have been put into place, and we have been graced with the presence of caretakers to assist in the maintenance of these properties. And this has greatly enhanced the beauty of the grounds, and it has become a great source of attracting the non-believers to come and visit and thereby make inquiries about the Baha'i faith. The institute process is doing really very well in Uganda. It's based in part on the Ruhi programs of South America, and we've adapted quite a bit of that into our process here in Uganda, and you can begin to see personal transformation of some of the individual believers.
Tuli amatondo,
genyanjemwe,
tuli ebingonjo,
enyanja mpangwe,
ije
tukwatanise, omukulonda omumwe, nugwe muhanda gw'amagara gawe nanywe.
There is good work amongst the youth and the children's classes, which gives me confidence in the future. That to the extent to which we get deepened youth and knowledgeable children, we are laying a foundation for the course to move perhaps even faster, because Uganda has to arise to its leadership role in the continent, because the House of Justice has reminded us time and again that the continent of Africa has a destiny. But that destiny depends on Uganda arising first, and I should probably even hasten to say Kampala needs to take the lead. That's where the mother temple is, and certainly if they arise, and then the country will arise, and if the country arises, then the continent will arise, as it was in the past, that Uganda did contribute to this spread of the coast in the continent. Pioneers arose from this country. They went to Kenya, to Tanzania, to Congo Brazzaville, and Enoch Olinga himself went to West Africa. And I think that is the kind of challenge Uganda is faced with, and it is capable of arising that.
A special systematic Enoch Olinga teaching project has been initiated by the National Spiritual Assembly and the Continental Board of Counselors. The Baha'is in eastern Uganda invite travel teachers to consult about their community development.
One of those teachings that Baha'u'llah said is a solution to our problem is the equality between men and women. When women are appointed and put into position of decision making, war will cease.
The grandchildren of Enoch Olinga come from 4 intercultural marriages of African, Persian, American, and New Zealand heritages, demonstrating to the world the oneness of humanity.
In a way, Papa Olinga has never left us, because as we've grown up, we've been told a lot of stories about him. Whatever we do, people remind us whether he would have wanted us to do it that way or not, and in that way it like streamlines your life.
My job of being a Baha'i child is to teach other non-Baha'i children about the Baha'i faith, and I'm proud of being a grandchild of Mr. Enoch Olinga.
The impact of Enoch Olinga's radiant life continues to set a high standard for the Baha'is of Africa.
The life of the late hand of the course, Enoch Olinga, need not to be described. It can only be experienced. Being with him was a transformation. And it did not matter for how long you were with the late hand of the cause. It didn't matter. Anybody who came in contact with him created a new life altogether. And I think we are basically, any Baha'i you see really in Uganda, ready to serve the faith, ready to do all these things, somehow part of his encouragement is from the late hand of the cause of God, Enoch Olinga. So therefore, we owe gratitude to Baha'u'llah that such a soul lived in our community, and we were able to get a glimpse of what this life is like.
You know, with reading now more about the life of Mr. Olinga, you look back and you realize how lucky we were, some of us, to have lived so closely with him and to have had the benefit of his love, his joy. You know, he inspired that sense of joy in everybody, and also the feeling that each one of us was very special and very much loved. And I think in every individual's life, that's what we need, to be, as individuals, to be made to feel that we are capable, that we are deserving of that kind of love. So I guess if I was to say what difference being close to Mr. Olinga made to me as an individual, it was to, you know, begin to love yourself and to be confident as an individual, as a woman, as an African, that the faith of Baha'u'llah is ours, you know, and that we should, you know, take charge, you know, of this beautiful and wonderful faith. Mr. Olinga was very, very loving, and he didn't have to know you. He just showered a lot of love, and that was very special.
When Enoch Olinga became a Baha'i, I saw a great change in his life. First, he stopped drinking. We were going together to drink. He stopped taking alcohol. Then he was. I lost his company in the evening because he was going to the Baha'i meetings to help teaching, and then I started following him. He was bringing Baha'i books in the office. When I read some Christian subject in the answered question of the Baha'is, then I got a ray of light and started attending the Baha'is meeting until I was convinced that Baha'u'llah was the promised one of all ages. After becoming a Baha'i, of course, I see a great change in my life, and I love all people. We used to be tribalists in Uganda, and we hated the white Asians, and but now we know how to accept Baha'u'llah, and I love all mankind.
What a fantastic opportunity this is, to be sitting here in the home where Enoch Olinga declared, right here. And Enoch Olinga was the one who inspired all of us. Enoch did the most wonderfully inspiring things. We all know that Enoch, when he became a Baha'i here, we know that he went out to his home area. He taught his mother, his father, his sister, his brother, the teacher, the policeman, everybody in his area. And that was the first Baha'i mass conversion in the world. I mean, this is history, and this is fantastic Baha'i history. But not only that is a miracle, then we all know how Enoch inspired us. He then went on out to, as a Knight of Baha'u'llah, to Cameroon, and then teaching in Cameroon. At the end of his first year, he had 13 Baha'is, and the Guardian urged them, please, there were 5 of the virgin territories which were not fulfilled, and he said, please, Enoch. And 5 of Enoch's new spiritual children went out and filled those 5 goals. So Enoch now then, 5 of his spiritual children came out and became Knights of Baha'u'llah. Enoch was one of us. He came from Uganda. Anybody here can take this as the most inspiring, wonderful Baha'i story. And this is Enoch. When he went teaching with the Aborigines in Australia, you know that lovely story of when the rain came and they had this little shelter for Enoch and all the rest of the people were getting wet. Enoch moved out into the rain and got wet like everybody else, and they just loved him. This was Enoch. Enoch was sensitive. Enoch was loving. Enoch was inspiring. And this is a great treasure for all of us here in Africa.
I remember one time Mr. Olinga had been abroad and he came back and he said, you know, now is the time for us to have a book exhibition at the Uganda Museum, and I want you to execute it, to get it to start, to make it happen. And I said, oh, Mr. Olinga, I would very much like to help do that, but where are the books? He said, never mind, you'll find them. And then he said, you know, you must always work as if you are the only one in the world to do what Baha'u'llah wants you to do. And taking that into my heart, I've always thought, never mind if you have too much on your shoulders, never mind, act as if you're the only one to bring this to the attention of others. And I think that's the way he affected me.
Actually, many people have asked me, for heaven's sakes, why did you go to South Africa? Of all places in the world, why go there? And of course the answer is that's where the faith was needed probably more than anywhere else in the world at that particular time. It was a long, slow process because we were not able to teach openly. We had to quietly go only to the black communities. We weren't supposed to teach the white people for that period of time. The blacks were so open to the faith. You could walk in, knock on any African door and say, can we come in and pray? And it was wide open. By all means, come. We would love to pray with you. And the faith was extremely precious because that's the way it was introduced, and the blacks felt how precious it was. And then, of course, it went on for many, many years that way, knowing when we knew that eventually it was going to change. But there is one incident concerning Enoch Olinga, which I think was very significant, and that is the fact that in 1968 there was a young Afrikaner, about 22 years of age, who came to Haifa during the international convention, and he there met John Robards, who was from his hometown, and yet they had never met. And John was so excited and pleased to meet an Afrikaner from his hometown of Mafeking that he introduced him immediately to Enoch Olinga, who was standing right next to him. And Enoch, being black, African, and Don Fouché, being a white Afrikaner who was not yet a Baha'i, met, and immediately something clicked between them spiritually. And Enoch just held out his arms to envelop this Afrikaner young man, and Don just melted into Enoch's arms, and it was at that moment, Don told me later, that he felt as though, yes, this is true, I must become a Baha'i. He was the first Afrikaner male to become a Baha'i. Sue Hofmeyr, by the way, was the first woman believer of Afrikaans background to become a Baha'i. And he then became a very, very active teacher all over, amongst the blacks, the coloreds, the Indians, the Malays, and his own Afrikaner people in the country. And who knows what kind of a spiritual influence this has had upon the fall of apartheid in South Africa.
The passing away of Hand of the Coast and Olinga was a big blow to all of us, but as time went by, the fruits of his work, the fruits of what he was doing in Kenya and also in our neighboring country Uganda could begin to be seen, and all of us feel very proud and very happy really that he left us such knowledge. Today, the faith has grown even much bigger, and the communities in Kenya have grown much stronger.
One time, one hand of the course is, I'm telling his love, he came again and collected me. You know, I was single, I had not got married, I was a youth, a national secretary who was young. So he came, Wafula, I'm taking you to my home. After welcoming me, he said to Mr. Wafula, now I'm going to cook. I will not let Madam Elizabeth to cook. I'm going to cook now, supper. And I remember the supper he cooked. It was fish. It was fish that he fried so beautifully, so nicely. And Mr. Olinga is a wonderful cook, I'm telling you. He's a wonderful cook. A cook. And Madam Elizabeth was there, and he cooked ugali very beautifully. And we put on the table, and you know, water we washed and we ate together. And then after that, then he prepared tea also. Yeah, he didn't let it. And he cooked tea and we had tea together. After that, then when it was getting, you know, around 10 p.m., he took me to the Baha'i center where I used to stay. Imagine. And he taught me, that was a lesson to me. Because, you know, in African tradition, when you are married as a husband, you are like a king. You just sit. You don't know where food is cooked in the kitchen. You don't even go to the kitchen. So your wife brings you food like a king, put on the table, and you eat. And that is a lesson I got from hand of the course in Olinga, that we should share responsibilities in a house. And that is what I also do. Yeah. And what about if your wife gets sick and you are not used to cook? Yeah. So you should, you know, you should cook and so on. You should know, you know, the responsibilities in the kitchen, all of you, so that when this one is busy or is sick, you even washing clothes. Yeah, you can wash the clothes of your wife. In African tradition, also washing clothes of your wife is a taboo. But the Baha'is, you know, after learning from hand of the course in Olinga, we should wash. Yeah, take the clothes and wash. Yeah, she takes yours, she washes, and so on and so on. So I learned this from the hand of the course.
Enoch Olinga's noble spirit and love for Baha'u'llah can still be felt today around the world.
Welcome from Port of Spain in the Caribbean. This is Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Julian Rogers, and we're here to share the memories of Enoch Olinga, hand of the cause of the Baha'i faith. With me, Sabine Coward and her husband, Lawrence.
He visited Trinidad, and we were invited to meet him at a friend's home, Miss Shamsi Sedegat, an Iranian pioneer who was living in Couva. And we went, my husband and I. And when we got there, Shamsi came down with him, and he embraced my husband first, and then he embraced me. And there was this feeling of magnetism radiating from him, and it was as being absorbed into this ocean of love.
What was magical to me was when he embraced me, I recognized that my inner being, or some people may say your soul, my soul met with his soul, and we became one. We became an ocean of oneness. And you didn't want to let go of the man.
Well, we organized a meeting at our home, and we invited the Baha'is of the community and also non-Baha'is. And Sharon wrote a poem in his honor. And after having dinner, she read the poem, and he was very touched by it. And he took the poem and he said, Sharon would be she's special, and she would be very great one day. And today, Sharon is working with the CBU, and her voice is heard throughout the Caribbean and sometimes in America.
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Olinga when he came in 1970. I don't remember too many details, but there's one experience that stands out in my mind. In addition to speaking to the public and giving very erudite and distinguished presentations, he went out to visit Baha'i communities in the various villages. He gave a presentation at City Hall, one of the most amazing presentations on reality I've ever heard anybody give.
But he was always a jolly man. And the first thing he asked you, are you happy? And he said, you must be happy at all times. If you're not happy this day, when you're going to be happy? And he goes on and talks to the people in Matura, in that area. He explained that Baha'u'llah was the eternal spirit of Christ. How could that be? So Mr. Olinga, his loving kindness way, how he did. And he always reminds us, he doesn't do anything unless that he feel the power of the Holy Spirit. He says, I don't make a move until I feel the power of the Holy Spirit. Because that's my guidance, and that we should all be that way.
He always seemed to be on another plane. You would talk to him and sort of drag him back into this place, and he would talk back and forth with you, but then, you know, soon he would be back on this other level, and I was thinking, boy, it would be so nice to be able to travel with this man. After he stopped in St. Thomas and was going down to Barbados, I had the nice experience in that I was able to travel with him for 9 hours.
2 years ago, Frank and I took a trip through the islands doing interviews, getting some history from the early believers and some of the, you know, the pioneers and such. And everywhere we went, Julian, people still remembered him. Now, he only made 2 trips in our area, and yet the feeling, he really moved the people. There was a power in him, but yet a simplicity that people seem to feel. Our area, of course, having this special feeling for high-ranking officials, particularly in the faith, being from Africa, there was a really extensive schedule set out for him. He was to meet the heads of state, ministers of government, prominent people, and of course all of the media. Now, we're staying out in this tiny little village in Barbados, but I really wanted him to come and come there. And I finally got up in the courage to ask him, and I said, well, do you suppose you could come out and, you know, talk at one of our meetings tonight? And he gives this you know, big sigh, because he has this really cramped schedule. And he says, well, what's it like where you are? And I think, oh. Now I begin to look in space, and I'm thinking, what can I say to him? And finally I said, well, where you are now, where you're staying now, is like the city. Where I'm staying is like the country. And he breaks out in this big smile. He says, let's go. So he was very happy there.
Now, we were playing, had to be around 71. We were booked up in Harlem to the Club Baron, opposite Miles. Miles and Dizzy were playing opposite each other, the 2 quintets. And man, Enoch Olinga was here in the United States, and he came to the club to see Dizzy.
But Olinga was so majestic. The people stood up and applauded for him, and didn't even know who he was.
But I know Dizzy looked up to him like a hero. It was after we met him that Dizzy wrote the tune Olinga. One of the key mysteries of his concept has to do with something he used to refer to as the perfect offbeat. Now, if you play that tune, a musician plays that tune, because of the way it's falling, where you're playing downbeats where upbeats would have went, it puts you into a flow of music that all of a sudden you're out in this place, man, and the tune does that. And I think it was more or less Dizzy giving a gift to musicians by writing a tune like that. The beginning of the tune, Olinga, is like a chant. It's like a chant. And you get this real calming experience just listening to it. And to hear all that big sea of people out there singing that was like, you know, make you have a chill, you know. Judy Rafat is a Baha'i, a singer, a very good singer, lives in Germany. And I got a call from Judy, and she wanted to do a tribute to Dizzy album. And they had approached me about writing the arrangements and actually producing it. But one of the tunes on it was Olinga.
In 1994, I had the opportunity to travel with a group of professional African American women throughout southern Africa. On the way back, we traveled to Haifa, Israel, and had the opportunity of speaking with a man by the name of Ali Nachavani, a wonderful person, wonderful and wise individual, who related a story about Enoch Olinga that I don't think any of us will ever forget. Enoch Olinga himself, a wonderful African man, himself great and wise, the story was about him being approached by a group of Muslims who asked him, could you speak to us a bit about what you know of tests and difficulties? And Enoch Olinga was rather taken by surprise. He didn't know what to say, so he contemplated, he meditated, and he was inspired by this particular story. And this is a story that Ali Nachavani told us. He said that, Enoch Olinga said that humanity was like an instrument. And that as instruments, all of us really had a longing desire to be played by this most great musician that everyone had heard about. And this yearning was within all of us. And he said, say you're a guitar, and this guitar yearns to be played by the most great musician, and finally one day the most great musician can hear the yearning of this guitar to be played. And so he picks it up gently, he holds it to his breast, because he knows how much this guitar longs to be played, and he attempts to play, but he has found that the guitar is out of tune because of non-use. But the great musician says, because I know how much this guitar longs to be played, I will tune it. And as he attempts to tune the first string, the string is brittle and does not yield to the tuning and breaks. And Enoch Olinga said, it is the tuning that is the tests and difficulties of life. He says, but the great musician says, but because I know this guitar wants so much to be played, I will play with 5 strings. And as he attempts to tune the 5th string, it too does not yield and breaks against the tuning. Until finally, All the strings have broken except one. And the great musician says, but because I know this instrument, this guitar desires so much to be played, I will play with one string. And so he attempts to tune the last string, and it too breaks. And now there are no strings left, and the great musician holds the guitar in his hands and he looks at it. And finally he casts it aside and searches for another that has the same yearning. Well, when we heard that, we kept thinking, well, now, surely this isn't the end of the story. He's going to give it some more strings. He's going to make a drum out of but he's not going to cast it aside. And it was at that time that Ali Nachavani said to us that Enoch Olinga explained that no matter how much you desire to serve, no matter how much you gifted you are, no matter how much you yearn, no matter what you do, if you do not yield to the tests and difficulties of life, you will break against them. And then God cannot use you.
Even though I never had the privilege of meeting Hand of the Cause of God, Enoch Olinga, there is one story that I've heard that I hope to share. I was at a meeting that was to discuss ways that the Institution of the Learned could assist communities in their growth and development. And so one of the counselors shared a story that talked about how Enoch Olinga would go, his method of teaching. He would go into a community and would quickly find a number of people who were attracted to the message and would declare their belief in Baha'u'llah. Mr. Olinga would teach in a community, and as soon as there were believers there, he would tell them that he would come and visit, and he would do this every few weeks. On his way there, he would bring refreshments, buy fruit at the market, and just would visit with the friends. They would begin by saying prayers and reading from the writings, and then he would ask them about their community life, and then he would invite everyone that was present to share in the refreshments. And this pattern went on for over a year, when finally one day, as they were discussing things that were going on in the community, he introduced to them the concept, which you've all guessed, of the 19-day feast as this great blessing that Baha'u'llah had taught. And he praised them lavishly because he just said, you have already been doing these things, and I know that you can continue them, you have experienced them, and so forth.
I would like to liken the life of Mr. Olinga to a piece of iron. And instead of being the dark piece of metal which had just become warm, he became luminous because he acquired the qualities of the fire and became luminous. And this was a process which Shoghi Effendi explained to him when he was on pilgrimage. He told him that Baha'is go through 3 stages: attraction, conversion, and dedication. So here was a dedicated Enoch Olinga, that he had become so consecrated and dedicated through his service, through his teaching, you see, through his study, through his personal adherence to Baha'i law in his life. He flowed. He became that iron that flew as a result of the heat of the fire, this divine fire that Baha'u'llah had brought to the world. And that was the 4th stage. And he continued to be like this till the end of his life. He always gave of himself to the friends. When he taught with radiance, with joy. When he spoke to the friends, he also did the same. He spoke with faith. He spoke with conviction. He spoke with love. Because he was no more a believer. He was a lover. He was not only a lover, he was an intoxicated lover. That's what he was.
And to many Baha'is that he has met, he was able to transmit this feeling of love for the cause. So through the circumstances of his life and through his personal effort, I would say his daily effort, and through the exercise of his own willpower, he was able to achieve so much in such a short time. He is truly an example to Baha'is everywhere, and more particularly to his fellow believers on the African continent. I loved him very much.
And of the cause of God, Mr. Enoch Olinga.
We all know that Baha'u'llah is the promised one, is the awaited one of the nations of the world, is the King of Kings. As a Christian, I was born a Christian. My parents were Christians of the Church of England. We are always expecting the return of Christ. And we're being taught in our church every time. And at the time I was drawing nigh when Jesus returned to earth, there was a time when I ran into a young man, a brilliant young man from Persia, Ali Nakubani. It was really Ali who first told me about Baha'u'llah in Kampala, Uganda. And he told me that Baha'u'llah, among other things, had said that he was the promised one of all ages, the return of the divine or spiritual reality of the manifestations of the past. That included Jesus Christ. And that struck me very much. And I was keenly interested to find more. Then Ali told me that it was one of the Baha'i principles that each and every individual should investigate the truth for themselves. So I began to look into it. And the future of the African continent, or the African people, is bright. There's no doubt about that. But I might as well add that Baha'u'llah has come for the people of the world, for the tribes, the races, and the nations of the world, and not for one particular continent or tribe. Right. He has come to rebuild the world, and indeed is the Lord of the world, the Lord of the universe. But I also remember where it is said that the last shall be first, and first shall be last. And this is, I think, a favor, a bounty, a blessing from the blessed beauty of Baha'u'llah to the people of Africa. Africa is witnessing a great change, a spiritual revolution, say. In Uganda, where I come from, there are thousands and thousands of believers in Baha'u'llah, and many local spiritual assemblies, and we have a Baha'i temple there. I can say that in a short while from now, there will be a real explosion in Africa, spiritually speaking, when thousands upon thousands will rush to the cause and embrace the faith and become identified with the name of the greatest manifestation, Baha'u'llah. We are living in wonderful days, the days of the Lord of mankind. And as I believe very fervently, Baha'u'llah is the King of glory, the King of kings, the Lord of hosts. Aren't you proud to be a Baha'i?
Oh, God made me a hollow reed from which the pith of self hath been blown. That I may become a clear channel through which thy love may flow to others. Oh, through which thy love may flow to others. Oh God, may